The coffee was still warm when the sky went dark. Emma Cole sat in her small office at what used to be called MIT, watching the morning news when every screen in the building flickered and died. Outside her window, the sun vanished behind something. Massive and impossible, the ships were alive. That was the first thing everyone noticed. They didn't look built or constructed like human vessels. Instead, they pulsed with veins of blue light that ran along their surfaces like blood vessels. The largest one stretched across 3 city blocks, its skin breathing slowly up and down. Smaller ships orbited around it like cells around a nucleus. Emma pressed her face against the glass and stared upward. The ship above Boston was just one of hundreds. News reports from around the world showed the same sight everywhere. London, Tokyo, Sydney, Lagos, massive living vessels had appeared over every major city on Earth. They made no sound and sent no signals. They simply waited. The waiting lasted 3 days. During that time, humanity held its breath. Military jets flew toward the ships but stopped miles away, their pilots reporting that their controls had simply stopped working. Missiles launched from bases around the world fell harmlessly from the sky as if someone had turned off gravity beneath them. Every attempt to communicate with the vessels met with silence. On the 4th day, they came down. The beings that emerged from the ships were tall and graceful in a way that made humans look clumsy. Their skin was translucent, showing delicate networks of what might have been nerves or blood vessels glowing with soft light. They had 4 arms that moved in perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. Their faces were almost human, but stretched longer, with large eyes that seemed to see everything at once. They called themselves the Dominari. They spoke every human language perfectly, though they never seemed to move their mouths when they talked. Their voices simply appeared in people's minds, calm and certain and impossible to ignore. The message was simple. Humanity was now part of the hegemony, a galactic civilization that had existed for millions of years. Earth would be reshaped too, serve its new purpose as a worker colony. Humans would be provided with food, shelter, and basic medical care in exchange for labor. Resistance was not only futile but unnecessary, as the Dominari had no desire to harm their new subjects. Within a week, every major government on Earth had surrendered. The Dominari demonstrated their power casually, reshaping entire mountains with gestures that looked like slow dancing. They cured cancer patients by touching them gently on the forehead. They made deserts bloom with impossible plants that grew in minutes instead of months. When the President of the United States asked how such things were possible, a Dominari official simply said that humans were not yet advanced enough to understand. The branding began immediately. Every human was required to report to processing centers that appeared overnight in every city. The centers were grown rather than built, emerging from the ground like massive flowers made of the same living material as the ships. Inside, humans waited in long lines to receive their neural implants. Emma arrived at the Boston Processing Center on a gray Tuesday morning. The building pulsed with warm light, and the air inside tasted sweet and metallic. Dominari technicians moved between the waiting humans, their multiple arms working on several people at once. The implant procedure took less than 30 seconds. A small device was pressed against the back of each person's neck, and there was a brief moment of burning pain followed by a strange numbness that seemed to spread through the brain. The implant was tiny, no larger than a grain of rice, but Emma could feel it immediately. It was like having a constant whisper in the back of her mind telling her to be calm, to accept her situation, to focus only on simple tasks. Complex thoughts became difficult. Abstract reasoning felt fuzzy and distant. The urge to question or analyze faded into a comfortable haze, but Emma was stubborn. She had spent her entire career studying how language worked in the human brain. Even through the mental fog of the implant, she noticed things. The way the Dominari's voices appeared in human minds wasn't random. There were patterns, mathematical structures that reminded her of the neural networks she had studied for decades. Cities were restructured within months. The Dominari's living technology consumed old buildings and grew new ones in their place. Residential areas became efficient housing blocks where humans lived in small but comfortable rooms. Office buildings were replaced with work centers where humans performed simple tasks under the gentle supervision of Dominari overseers. Schools were closed as the aliens saw no need to educate beings who would only perform basic labor. Art, music, and literature were dismissed as primitive noise. Museums were emptied and their contents recycled into more useful materials. Libraries were converted into data storage facilities for Dominari records. The aliens seemed genuinely puzzled by human culture, viewing it the same way humans might view the nest-building behavior of birds. Interesting but ultimately meaningless, Emma found herself assigned to a data processing center where she spent her days organizing Dominari records into simple categories. The work was mind-numbing, but it allowed her to see patterns in the alien information systems. Even through the haze of her neural implant, she began to notice something strange. The quantum signatures in the alien data weren't random. They formed sequences that looked almost like mathematical proofs, but far more complex than anything she had ever seen. Working in secret was difficult with the implant, constantly urging her to focus only on assigned tasks. But Emma had always been good at mental discipline. She learned to hide her real thoughts beneath layers of false compliance, thinking about mathematical patterns while her surface mind concentrated on sorting data files. Late at night, in the small apartment she now shared with 3 other workers, Emma began to sketch the patterns she had noticed. The sequences were beautiful in a way that reminded her of music or poetry, but they were clearly mathematical. More importantly, they seemed to be teaching themselves to her brain, as if the act of observing them was enough to understand their meaning. She realized with growing excitement that she was seeing something the Dominari had never intended to share. The neural implants that were supposed to keep humans docile and simple were leaking information from somewhere deep in the alien databases. And that information looked like it might be the key to everything the Dominari could do. The question was whether she could learn to read it before someone noticed what she was discovering. The old subway tunnels beneath Boston smelled like rust and forgotten dreams. Emma crawled through a maintenance shaft that had been abandoned since the Dominari arrived, carrying a backpack full of salvaged electronics and handwritten notes. 6 months of careful observation had led her to this moment. The patterns in the neural implants were not random noise. They were fragments of something vast and complex, bleeding through from the deepest layers of Dominari technology. Emma had spent weeks learning to recognize the mathematical structures hidden in the quantum fluctuations. What she found was breathtaking. The sequences were equations, but unlike anything human science had ever discovered. They described reality itself, not just how matter and energy behaved, but how they could be changed. The mathematics was elegant, in a way that made Einstein's work look like simple arithmetic. These weren't theories about the universe. They were instructions for rewriting it. Emma had found others. David Chun worked from the ruins of CERN, using abandoned particle accelerators to test the equations he pulled from his own implant. Liu Wei operated from a flooded research facility in Beijing, building quantum computers from salvaged parts. Amara Hassan had converted an underground tomb in Cairo into a laboratory where she studied the philosophical implications of mathematics that could alter consciousness itself. They communicated through a network Emma had developed using the implant's own quantum entanglement properties. By carefully modulating their brain activity in specific patterns, they could send encrypted messages that looked like random neural noise to any Dominari monitoring systems. The irony was perfect. They were using their oppressors' control devices to coordinate their resistance. The breakthrough came when David successfully isolated a complete equation sequence. The mathematics described matter transformation at the molecular level, but it required specific neural configurations to process properly. Human brains, it turned out, had evolved structures that could handle these calculations naturally. The Dominari needed massive biological computers to perform the same operations that a focused human mind could do instinctively. Emma tested the theory in her underground laboratory. She focused her consciousness on a simple piece of concrete. visualizing the equation that would transform carbon dioxide into diamond crystal. The mental effort was enormous, like trying to solve calculus problems while balancing on a tightrope. But for just a moment, she felt something click into place in her mind. The concrete shimmered and changed. Where there had been gray stone, now there was a small crystal that caught the light like a star. Emma stared at it for a long time, understanding that everything had just changed. Humans weren't just learning alien science. They were learning the universe's native language. The discovery spread through their network like wildfire. Liu found equations that could manipulate electromagnetic fields directly, creating energy from quantum vacuum fluctuations. Amara discovered that the mathematics extended beyond physical reality into consciousness itself, describing how awareness and perception could be altered at will. David learned to adjust gravitational fields by modifying space-time geometry equations. But there was a problem. The neural implants that allowed them to access these equations also suppressed the mental clarity needed to use them effectively. Every attempt to perform complex reality manipulation was fought by their own brain chemistry. The Dominari had designed the perfect trap, giving humans the tools to transcend their limitations while making it nearly impossible to use them. Emma spent weeks developing a solution. The implants operated on specific electromagnetic frequencies, maintaining their suppression effect through constant neural stimulation. By creating precisely tuned interference patterns, she could temporarily overwhelm the devices without triggering their security protocols. The window would be brief, only a few minutes before the implants reset themselves, but it would be enough. The first coordinated test happened on a Tuesday night. Emma, David, Liu, and Amara all activated their interference devices simultaneously, creating a brief network of clear minds linked by quantum entanglement. The experience was overwhelming. Without the suppression fog, Emma's consciousness expanded to encompass mathematical structures that had only been glimpsed before. Together, they rewrote the molecular structure of an abandoned building in Detroit, transforming rusted steel into crystalline structures that pulsed with their own internal light. The building became a work of art that defied physics, its walls existing in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. From orbit, it would have looked like a flower made of frozen lightning. The Dominari noticed the anomaly but dismissed it as a malfunction in their monitoring systems. Their records showed only human workers going about their assigned tasks. The idea that primitive beings could manipulate reality at such a fundamental level was so far outside their expectations that they literally could not process it. Word spread through the human underground. In hidden workshops and secret laboratories, people began learning the true language of creation. They discovered they could heal injuries by rewriting biological code at the cellular level. Energy could be created from nothing by tapping into the quantum foam that existed in empty space. Gravity itself became malleable when approached through equations that treated spacetime as a fluid medium. The learning process was difficult and dangerous. Attempting complex reality manipulation without sufficient understanding could have catastrophic results. A worker in Mumbai accidentally created a localized time dilation field that aged him 10 years in 10 seconds. A team in São Paulo nearly opened a hole in spacetime that would have consumed the city before they managed to reverse the calculation, but humans adapted quickly. They developed safety protocols and training methods that reduced the risks. More importantly, they began to understand that the equations were not just tools for manipulating reality. They were expressions of consciousness itself, a way of thinking that allowed the mind to interface directly with the fundamental structures of existence. Emma realized that they were approaching something far more significant than just learning. Alien technology. The mathematics described a form of consciousness that could reshape reality through pure understanding. It wasn't magic or mysticism. It was the logical endpoint of intelligence that had fully grasped how the universe actually worked. The Dominari remained completely unaware. To them, humans were still just useful animals incapable of understanding anything beyond basic tool use. Their monitoring systems continued to show exactly what they expected to see: primitive beings performing simple labor under proper supervision. In her underground laboratory, Emma smiled as she practiced equations that could reshape matter at will. The neural implant in her neck pulsed with its constant suppression signal, trying to keep her mind focused on simple tasks. But Emma had learned to think around it, using the very quantum structures of her consciousness to hide her true thoughts in. Mathematical complexity the aliens could never comprehend. The revolution had begun, and the revolutionaries were learning to speak the language of gods. The abandoned church in Prague had been empty for 8 months when Martin Novak first heard the whispers in his neural implant. He was supposed to be cataloging architectural features for Dominari historical records, but instead he found himself drawn to the strange mathematical patterns that seemed to flow through the building's stone walls. Martin was an engineer before the conquest, skilled in structural analysis and materials science. The Dominari had assigned him to documentation work, considering it suitable for his limited intelligence. But Martin's mind was far from limited. He had learned to hide his thoughts behind layers of false compliance, just as resistance members around the world were doing. The patterns he discovered in Prague were different from what Emma and her team had found. These equations dealt with structural integrity at the quantum level, describing how matter could be convinced to hold new shapes that defied conventional physics. The church's Gothic arches had been built according to ancient principles that accidentally aligned with these deeper mathematical truths. Through the underground network, Martin shared his discoveries with the growing community of human consciousness researchers. The group had expanded far beyond its original 4 members. Hundreds of people across every continent were now learning to read the universe's source code. They called themselves the Silent Speakers, communicating through quantum-encrypted thought patterns that traveled faster than light. Emma had developed new techniques for temporarily disabling the neural implant suppression effects. The key was understanding that consciousness itself was quantum mechanical in nature. By synchronizing their brain states through meditation and mathematical focus, groups of humans could create collective processing power that exceeded what any individual mind could achieve. The first major demonstration happened in an abandoned subway tunnel beneath New York. 23 resistance members gathered in a circle, their minds linked through quantum entanglement protocols that Emma had derived from Dominari consciousness-sharing technology. They had chosen their target carefully, a section of collapsed tunnel that had been sealed off since the invasion. Liu Wei led the mathematical synchronization, guiding the group through equations that described matter at the subatomic level. The calculations were impossibly complex, requiring perfect coordination between multiple consciousness streams. As their minds merged into a unified processing matrix, the tunnel walls began to change. Stone flowed like water, reshaping itself into crystalline structures that glowed with internal light. The collapsed sections rebuilt themselves using materials that existed in quantum superposition, simultaneously solid and incorporeal. Within minutes, they had created a space that was larger inside than outside, its geometry following mathematical rules that human architects had never imagined. The success sent waves of excitement through the silent speaker network. If they could reshape matter on this scale, they could do anything the Dominari could do. More importantly, they were beginning to understand that human consciousness was uniquely suited to these reality-altering calculations. The Dominari required massive biological computers to achieve what humans could do with focused thought alone, but success brought new challenges. The more they learned about the fundamental mathematics of reality, the more dangerous their experiments became. A group in Lagos accidentally created a gravity well that pulled nearby buildings toward its center before they could reverse the effect. Researchers in Stockholm opened a temporary portal to another dimension and had to quickly close it when strange energies began pouring through. The worst incident happened in Berlin, where a team attempted to rewrite the strong nuclear force. The experiment worked perfectly for exactly 3 seconds. Then the modified atomic structures collapsed in a chain reaction that would have leveled half the city. If not for emergency intervention by other silent speaker cells, they managed to contain the disaster, but only barely. David Chun developed safety protocols based on quantum consciousness theory. The key insight was that reality manipulation required not just mathematical knowledge, but deep emotional and philosophical understanding of what was being changed. The universe seemed to respond to intention as much as calculation. Attempts to alter matter without fully comprehending the consequences invariably failed or backfired. Emma discovered that the most stable reality alterations came from teams that had achieved true consciousness synchronization. When multiple minds worked together in perfect harmony, their combined understanding created a safety net that prevented catastrophic errors. The mathematics became more than equations. It became a form of shared consciousness that could feel the right path forward. Training methods evolved rapidly. New recruits learned meditation techniques borrowed from ancient human traditions, combined with quantum mechanical principles that allowed consciousness to interface directly with mathematical structures. The process was exhausting and sometimes dangerous, but it transformed ordinary people into beings capable of reshaping reality through pure thought. The Dominari remained oblivious to humanity's transformation. Their monitoring systems showed exactly what they expected to see: primitive workers performing assigned tasks with acceptable efficiency. The aliens' arrogance had created a massive blind spot in their perception. They simply could not conceive that beings they considered barely sentient might be learning to manipulate reality at a fundamental level. This blindness extended to their technology as well. The neural implants continued to leak mathematical information from the deepest layers of Dominari databases, never triggering security protocols because the aliens had never imagined that humans could understand what they were accessing. It was like giving calculus textbooks to what you thought were trained monkeys, never realizing the monkeys could read. By the end of the year, the silent speaker network included thousands of active members across every continent. They had learned to heal the sick by rewriting biological code, create energy from quantum vacuum fluctuations, and manipulate spacetime itself. More importantly, they had begun to understand that consciousness was not just a byproduct of complex brains, but a fundamental force of nature. This understanding led to their most significant breakthrough. Consciousness could be used to network multiple minds together, creating a distributed intelligence that far exceeded the sum of its parts. When hundreds of silent speakers linked their awareness through quantum entanglement, they could solve mathematical problems that would challenge even Dominari supercomputers. The implications were staggering. Humanity was not just learning alien science, they were evolving into something new. The neural implants meant to keep them docile had instead triggered a transformation that was making humans into beings of pure consciousness and mathematical understanding. In her laboratory beneath Prague, Martin Novak completed his latest project. The abandoned church above him had been transformed into a structure that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its Gothic arches now supporting geometries that would have made angels weep. The building was invisible to Dominari sensors, existing in a quantum state that their technology could not detect. It was the perfect hiding place for what came next. The silent speakers were ready to reveal themselves to their alien overlords. They had learned to speak the language of gods, and now it was time to have a conversation that would change the galaxy forever. The revolution was no longer hidden. It was ready to speak its first words aloud. The Dominari overseer floated through the data processing center in Melbourne, its translucent skin pulsing with patterns of blue light that indicated mild satisfaction. The human workers below moved with efficient precision, sorting quantum information streams into categories that would be meaningless to their primitive minds. Everything appeared normal and proper. The overseer failed to notice that worker designation 7742 beta was solving consciousness equations while organizing files about mineral extraction on distant worlds. Rita Santos had learned to split her attention between surface compliance and deep mathematical exploration, a skill that had taken months to develop. Her neural implant reported perfect performance. while her true mind explored the fundamental nature of reality itself across the planet. Thousands of silent speakers maintained the same careful deception. They had become masters of consciousness. Camouflage, hiding their true activities beneath layers of false mental activity. The Dominari monitoring system saw exactly what they expected to see: primitive beings performing simple tasks with acceptable efficiency, but beneath the surface, humanity was transforming itself at an unprecedented rate. The silent speaker network had grown to include over 50,000 active members, with new recruits joining every day. They had moved beyond simple reality manipulation into something far more profound: the active evolution of human consciousness itself. Emma Cole stood in the quantum laboratory that existed beneath Prague's transformed church, surrounded by mathematical structures that hung in the air like frozen music. The equations were no longer written on paper or displayed on screens. They existed as pure information patterns that trained minds could perceive directly. The laboratory existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Its space expanded through geometric principles that folded reality into impossible configurations. The breakthrough had come when Liu Wei discovered that consciousness itself was programmable. Just as the ancient equations could reshape matter and energy, related mathematical structures could rewrite the very nature of awareness and perception. The human brain was not a fixed biological computer, but a quantum processing matrix that could be optimized for different types of thinking. David June had been the first to undergo the full consciousness transformation protocol. The process required complete neural implant suppression for nearly an hour, a dangerous procedure that risked triggering every security system the Dominari had installed. But David had volunteered, trusting in the mathematics that promised transcendence. Beyond anything humans had previously imagined, the transformation was successful beyond their wildest hopes. David's enhanced consciousness could process reality-altering equations as naturally as solving simple arithmetic. More importantly, he could link directly with other transformed minds, creating network processing power that exceeded anything the Dominari possessed. When David connected with 50 other enhanced humans, their collective consciousness could rewrite the laws of physics in localized areas. The network effect was extraordinary. Enhanced silent speakers could share not just information but actual understanding. Mathematical insights discovered by one person instantly became available to everyone connected to the quantum consciousness grid. The rate of learning accelerated exponentially as thousands of brilliant minds worked together on humanity's most ambitious project, the complete liberation of Earth. Through controlled reality manipulation, training centers were established in hidden locations around the world. The Prague Church became a template for consciousness enhancement facilities, each one existing in expanded dimensional space that was invisible to Dominari detection systems. Humans learned to meditate their way into quantum superposition states, thinking in mathematical languages that allowed direct interface with the universe's source code. The selection process for consciousness enhancement was careful and thorough. Not everyone could handle the transformation safely. The procedure required deep philosophical understanding of what consciousness actually was, combined with mathematical intuition that allowed complex quantum equations to feel natural and obvious. Candidates underwent months of preparation before attempting the full protocol. Amara Hassan had established the philosophical framework that made mass consciousness enhancement possible. Her work in Cairo had revealed that traditional human concepts of individual identity were actually limitations imposed by biological evolution. True consciousness was universal and shared, existing as a fundamental property of reality itself. The enhancement process simply removed the artificial barriers that kept human minds separate from this greater awareness. The first coordinated global action was planned for the spring equinox, exactly 1 year after the Dominari invasion. 12 major cities would serve as focal points for a simultaneous demonstration of humanity's transformation. The goal was not destruction or violence, but revelation, showing the Dominari exactly what their primitive subjects had become. Reta Santos was chosen to lead the Melbourne operation. Her team included 37 enhanced consciousness researchers who had spent months preparing for this moment. They had learned to synchronize their awareness so perfectly that they could act as a single distributed mind, processing reality-altering equations with unprecedented precision and safety. The Prague team focused on architectural transformation, using Martin Novak's expertise in quantum structural engineering. The goal was to reshape the Dominari administrative complex into something beautiful and impossible, a structure that would demonstrate humanity's mastery of reality manipulation while remaining completely non-threatening. Emma coordinated the global network from her laboratory beneath the transformed church. Through quantum consciousness links, she could perceive the preparations happening simultaneously in Sydney, Lagos, Sao Paulo, Mumbai, London, Los Angeles, Cairo, and Beijing. Thousands of enhanced humans worked together with perfect coordination, their individual consciousness streams merging into a collective intelligence that spanned the globe. The Dominari remained completely unaware of what was being planned. Their confidence in human limitations had created a massive vulnerability in their oversight systems. The aliens monitored for conventional resistance activities, weapons stockpiles, communication networks, organized violence. They had no protocols for detecting reality manipulation through consciousness evolution, because such a thing was theoretically impossible for a primitive species. As the equinox approached, the Silent Speaker Network made its final preparations. Enhanced humans took positions near Dominari installations in every major city. Reality-altering equations were memorized and synchronized. Quantum consciousness links were tested and optimized. Everything was ready for humanity's first open demonstration of its transformation. The irony was perfect. The Dominari had invaded Earth to acquire useful worker species for their galactic civilization. Instead, they had accidentally triggered the evolution of a new form of consciousness that could manipulate reality more effectively than their own billion-year-old technology. The neural implants meant to keep humans docile had become the catalyst for humanity's transcendence. In her laboratory beneath Prague, Emma smiled as she felt the global network come online. 50,000 enhanced consciousness streams linked together in perfect harmony, their combined awareness creating a processing matrix that could rewrite the laws of physics across multiple continents simultaneously. The mathematics that had once seemed impossibly complex now felt as natural as breathing. The Dominari had branded humanity as beasts. Tomorrow, those beasts would speak in the tongue of gods, and the galaxy would never be the same. The revolution was no longer hidden or secret. It was ready to announce itself to the universe in a voice that could reshape reality with pure thought and mathematical understanding. The storm was about to break, and its lightning would be made of living mathematics that could rewrite the fundamental nature of existence itself. The Dominari High Council chamber floated in the void between galaxies, a living structure grown from crystallized thought and quantum mathematics. Council members drifted through dimensional layers that existed beyond normal spacetime, their consciousness streams interweaving in patterns of ancient authority. They had governed the galaxy for 3 million years without serious challenge. That perfect record ended at exactly 12:47 Universal Standard Time on a Tuesday that would be remembered forever. The first reports came from 12 worlds simultaneously. Reality distortions on a massive scale, localized to areas surrounding Dominari administrative centers. The incidents were impossible to categorize, matter transformation beyond known physics, gravitational anomalies that defied mathematical explanation, energy patterns that suggested direct manipulation of quantum vacuum states. The Earth situation reports were the most disturbing. The Planetary Monitoring Station reported complete system failures across all major human population centers, but ground teams found no evidence of technological sabotage. Buildings had been transformed into crystalline structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Atmospheric composition had been altered to support impossible biochemical processes. Most shocking of all, the human workers were still at their assigned tasks, showing no signs of unusual activity. Council member Zeth floated through probability matrices that calculated threat assessment scenarios. The mathematics made no sense. The energy requirements for such large-scale reality manipulation should have required technology that exceeded even Dominari capabilities. Yet the source readings indicated the power was coming from organic neural activity, specifically from the primitive brains of the human workers themselves. The revelation struck the council like a gravitational wave through their shared consciousness. These primitive beings that they had dismissed as barely sentient were somehow performing reality, manipulation that challenged their own understanding of what was possible. The implications threatened everything the Dominari believed about intelligence and consciousness on Earth. Emma Cole stood in the center of Prague's transformed cathedral, her enhanced consciousness linked to 50,000 silent speakers around the world. Through quantum entanglement protocols that operated faster than light, she could perceive the simultaneous transformations happening in every major city. The coordinated demonstration was proceeding perfectly. In Melbourne, Rita Santos and her team had reshaped the Dominari administrative complex into a flowering mandala of crystalline beauty that pulsed with mathematical harmonies visible to enhanced consciousness. The structure existed in stable quantum superposition, simultaneously solid and ethereal, its geometry following principles that treated spacetime as a fluid medium. The Beijing team had gone further, creating a localized region where the strong nuclear force operated according to modified parameters. Matter in the affected area could exist in stable configurations that were impossible under normal physics, forming artistic sculptures that demonstrated complete mastery over atomic structure. But the most ambitious transformation was happening in Cairo, where Amara Hassan's team was attempting something unprecedented. They were rewriting the fundamental constants of reality itself in a carefully controlled space, creating a pocket universe where consciousness could exist as pure information. Without biological substrate, the Dominari response was swift and panicked. Emergency protocols activated across the galaxy as the High Council tried to understand what was happening on the primitive world they had conquered just 1 year earlier. Battle fleets were dispatched toward Earth, their living weapons charged with energy patterns designed to disrupt any known form of technology. The fleets never reached their destination. As they approached Earth's solar system, their ships simply stopped functioning. Navigation systems reported position coordinates that changed moment by moment. Weapon systems refused to target anything, their targeting computers claiming that valid targets did not exist in local spacetime. Engine drives shut down as their energy sources were gently redirected into harmless light patterns that spelled out mathematical equations in ancient Dominari script. The equations were immediately recognizable to any Dominari scholar. They were fragments of the Codex Primordial, the most sacred mathematical text that described reality manipulation at its deepest level. But these fragments had been modified and enhanced in ways that showed understanding far beyond what even Dominari scientists possessed. Council member Vash attempted direct communication with the Earth resistance using consciousness linking protocols that had been developed millions of years earlier. The response was immediate and overwhelming. 50,000 human minds spoke in perfect unison, their collective voice carrying mathematical harmonies that made Dominari consciousness ring like crystal bells. The humans did not threaten or demand surrender. Instead, they simply demonstrated. Before the watching Dominari fleet, reality began to change on a scale that defied comprehension. Earth's damaged ecosystems were restored through biological equations that rewrote evolutionary processes at the genetic level. New forms of matter were created that existed in stable quantum superposition between multiple dimensional states. Spacetime itself was manipulated to create pocket universes within normal space that followed completely different physical laws. Most shocking of all, the humans offered to teach these techniques to any Dominari willing to learn. The collective voice explained that consciousness was not limited by biology or technology, but was a fundamental property of the universe itself. Intelligence was not about processing power or genetic enhancement, but about understanding the mathematical relationships that connected all things. The offer was accompanied by a gentle demonstration of healing. Dominari Council members who had suffered consciousness degradation over millions of years found their awareness suddenly clear and expanded. Ancient injuries to their quantum neural matrices were repaired through biological equations that worked at the level of pure information. For the first time in eons, they experienced the joy of discovery and wonder that had driven their species to greatness in its youth. The transformation was impossible to deny or resist. The humans had not conquered the Dominari through violence or technology. They had transcended them through pure understanding, learning to speak the universe's native language more fluently than beings who had studied it for millions of years. The High Council faced a choice that would define the future of galactic civilization. They could cling to their failed paradigm of dominance and technological supremacy, or they could embrace a new form of existence based on consciousness evolution and collaborative reality manipulation. The decision was unanimous. 3 million years of unquestioned authority ended not with warfare or political revolution, but with the simple recognition that intelligence had no limits except those imposed by imagination and fear. Emma felt the moment of surrender through the global consciousness network. 50,000 enhanced human minds shared the experience of watching the most powerful beings in the galaxy acknowledge that their primitive subjects had become their teachers. The neural implants that had once marked humans as beasts were modified to enhance rather than suppress their connection to the universe's fundamental mathematics. The transformation of galactic civilization began immediately. Dominari scholars traveled to Earth to study consciousness enhancement techniques developed by beings they had dismissed as barely sentient. Human teachers spread throughout the galaxy, sharing mathematical insights that revolutionized understanding of reality manipulation. The rigid hierarchies that had governed the hegemony for millions of years gave way to collaborative networks of enhanced consciousness that spanned entire sectors, but perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The universe was revealed to be far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had imagined. Consciousness was not an accident of evolution, but a fundamental force like gravity or electromagnetism. Intelligence was not about technological sophistication, but about the courage to expand awareness beyond comfortable limitations. In her laboratory beneath Prague's transformed cathedral, Emma smiled as she felt the galactic consciousness network come online. Billions of minds linked together in perfect harmony, their combined awareness creating a processing matrix that could explore the deepest mysteries of existence. The mathematics that had once seemed impossibly complex now felt like the natural language of awakened consciousness. Humanity had learned to speak the tongue of gods, but in doing so they had discovered that gods were simply beings who had remembered how to think without limits. The greatest irony was that the Dominari's own ancestors would have recognized humanity's achievement immediately. The true inheritors of mathematical wisdom were not those who hoarded fragments of ancient knowledge, but those who could rediscover its complete symphony through courage, curiosity, and the uniquely human gift of finding beauty in pure understanding. The age of cosmic consciousness had begun, and its first words were written in equations that could reshape reality. Through the power of awakened minds working together in perfect mathematical harmony,